All right, guys. Good morning. Good morning to you. Happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. This morning, we're going to continue our series on mentorship, and I'm going to talk to you this morning about the guy that I think is the GOAT of mentorship, of public speaking, of all kinds of different things, Mr. Ed Mylett. Let's get started.
It is ultimately important for you to look at your goals, truly what you want to do in your life, and then look at the people who you spend the most time with in your life and figure out if that lines up.
All right, guys, what's happening? Good morning to you. Happy to be here. Happy Tuesday, man. I'm fired up to have this conversation this morning. It's about somebody who has had a massive, massive impact on my life. We're talking mentorship this week. And, you know, for me, one of the things that I mentioned to you guys yesterday was the way that I really choose mentors is very intentional. And so I try to choose those mentors that really I see myself in the most, right? I see the potential of who I can become the most in these people. And so on this day, I want to talk about Ed Mylett, who I am a member of the Arte Syndicate. So I've been a member there for a few years. I've met some of the best friends that I have in my life as a result of that program. Ed Mylett and Andy Frisella created that program. And man, it has made a massive impact on so many people's lives. And the reason that they created that program is that they saw something that was missing in a space that they wanted to make an impact on. And so they started with an insane number of core values that are just dead on to exactly what they wanted to create, right? I believe there's 6 or 7 core values, maybe not an insane number, but just the accuracy of these core values and how those core values are reflected in that organization is absolutely exceptional. And so as I got into the Arte Syndicate and I was studying Ed Mylett prior to being in the Arte Syndicate. But once I got into the Arte group, I really doubled down on that as I started to consume more of his information, more of his theories, more of the way that he approaches life, business, family, etc. I just became really dialed in on that being someone that I could model my life after, model my business after, and it has made a massive impact on my life. So who is Ed Mylett? Well, he is definitely a man of God. He talks about his faith quite a bit, an exceptional father, a great husband, speaks about his wife all the time and with great admiration, and an incredibly successful entrepreneur who now owns or involved, I think it's like right around 23 businesses. Don't quote me on that, but he is either an investor in or owns 23 successful businesses. So when I read that list off, right, a man of God, an exceptional father, a great husband who speaks amazing about his wife all the time, and a very successful entrepreneur with a lot of businesses, and has a significant net worth. I mentioned that last because of all the things that I admire about him, that the amount of money that his net worth represents is probably last on the list. Not that it's not important, but it is last on the list. Everything else that I just mentioned, a man of God, an exceptional father, a husband, a very successful entrepreneur who is able to juggle a massive number of things. Those are all things that I aspire to be myself and things that I work on every single day. So when we talk about mentorship and we talk about who we choose to be mentored by, I'm going to repeat it to you guys again. I said it yesterday, but it is critically important for you to understand the person, the human being that is behind the name, the business that they represent. Who actually is this person? And how do you figure that out? Well, I'm going to tell you today how I figured it out and what I've learned about Ed in the process of figuring that out. Some of the things that stand out to me that made me choose him as literally my number one mentor. John Maxwell is up there. I've studied John Maxwell a lot longer than I've really paid attention to the content that Ed Mylett put out. I was only introduced to Ed several years ago. But this guy, I see myself in more. I see more of who I can become in Ed than John. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with John Maxwell. There absolutely is not. But I relate more. I connect more. I see myself more. That motivates me more. So think about that. When you're choosing a mentor, who are you choosing? And once you choose, are you really trying to figure out all those things about them? What are the things that they do that make them exceptional? And when you get down into the details of what they do, it's rarely the things that you think. It's rarely the things that you're looking for that you find that create that greatness. And I'm going to get into those this morning. So I want to say good morning to some folks. What's happening, Scott Risley? Good morning, man. Jared, good morning. Carla, Sanjay, Trudy, Cam Roberts, what's happening, man? Mr. Calloway, good morning to you, all the way from the West Coast, bright and early, man. Ryan Austin, Chris Filippelli, Rick, Scott, good morning to you guys. Thank you guys for being here. So I am currently in the process of going back and making sure that I have consumed every single podcast and YouTube episode that Ed has ever put out on his show. And I have learned so much. So when I say to you guys, study someone and try to figure out what it is that they do, they say success leaves clues. Well, they don't, it's not just about the content they deliver, but it is actually studying the behaviors, actually studying the things that are sometimes unsaid that make them great. When they're interviewing people, how do they do that? What do they say? How do they ask the questions? How do they respond to things? Ed Mylett actually says the greatest gifts of information are caught, not taught. So it's by observation that we learn the most. And I'm going to give you guys some of the list of why I believe Ed Mylett, at least for me, sits atop Goat Mountain when it comes to mentorship. Number one on the list, I don't think that there's anybody that is any better, that delivers better content, that has better information, that is more caring of a person, or that is a better example for people to follow. Now, he would tell you that he's not perfect, and we all understand that about human beings. But man, there's a lot to admire. There's just a lot to admire. I sent one of my friends a message, my buddy Chris Saunders, when we were listening to Ed deliver his speech just a week and change ago here at the Blue Collar American Dream Conference. And I said, man, I have so much admiration for this man. It literally makes me emotional. And I say that confidently, guys. When you find that person that inspires you, that makes you want to be better, that drives you, that you can see something in them that you want in yourself, don't ever let your foot off the gas when it comes to figuring out what it is that made them that way. One of the things that I've done with Ed and John Maxwell, actually, is I have studied those that they have studied. So when they mention the books, the people that have helped shape them, I try to invest myself into that content because I want to figure out not just who that person is, but I want to study who they studied that helped shape them into who the person is that I see today. So here's some of the things that stand out to me about Ed that I think make him unique and have put him in that position in my life. So he speaks on what he has studied. You've heard me say that before. He speaks on what he has studied. He studied it so extensively that it's become literally part of who he is. It's become part of his soul. It's become part of who he is. It's like breathing in and breathing out. When he speaks on topics, when he teaches, it's absolutely critical to realize that is not something that he has to massively prepare for. He might prepare for his speeches, but the information and what he speaks on comes from his soul, comes from his heart. The state that he delivers his messages from is exceptional. The state, the emotional makeup. He has the perfect balance of incredible intensity. Anybody that's been around him or listened to him speak will tell you this. But he always has this unique way of wrapping in so much love, care, and compassion into every single example, every story, every interview that he does. That's who I want to be. I always want that balance of intensity, but massive compassion. I've heard Ed speak on how he prepares to speak in front of crowds or how he prepares for interviews, and he does that by praying and asking God to guide his words. Now, at the Blue Collar American Dream Conference, I was backstage with a buddy of mine, and we were speaking to Ed, and I watched him step away to get into that state and to prepare. That is something that I massively admire about this guy. Just his approach to everything. He uses real life examples to move you. So he doesn't speak on theory. He speaks on experience. He doesn't teach you theory. He teaches tactical approaches to things that he has learned in his life. And he is one of the most gifted storytellers that I've ever listened to. If you listen to those people that you admire the most, you're going to see that trait, that storyteller trait in those people quite a bit. Something you guys should all be practicing if you're not. He has an incredible sense of the spirit of the people that are around him, and he has a magical way of making sure that every single person in the room is connecting with what he's saying. He uses things like triggers, right? You'll hear Ed snap his fingers quite a bit. That's a trigger to him, but it's also a trigger to get people's attention. He has a magical way of connecting with people in the audience. When I look around a room when Ed is speaking, nobody is looking down at their phone. He does killer interviews, which makes him not just an incredible teacher, but it proves that he's also an incredible listener, in addition to being an incredible speaker and teacher. Those are qualities that you don't always find in every person, right? Sometimes somebody's a great teacher, but they may not be the best listener. He's an incredible interviewer. As I get into the second phase of this podcast and I start doing interviews, I have pages and pages of notes that I've taken of how Ed handles those interviews. He intentionally surrounds himself with diversity. And something that I recognize, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I'm correct. He does that not just because it's the right thing to do and not just because he wants to include women and diverse people in his businesses, but because it comes with the diversity of thoughts that come along with those people. Those little things, those little inches of valuing people's different thoughts, that's what makes you the GOAT. It's the details. He talks about Tom Brady all the time. And he used a reference in his speech at the Blue Collar American Dream Conference talking about equanimity, being calm under duress, being calm when you are at the highest level of stress. And he said that's what makes Tom Brady the GOAT. I would challenge Ed that he is no different. He's exactly the same. He's at his best when the stress is incredibly high. The way that he speaks about his parents, his dad, shares his stories about his family. If you pay attention, you're not just listening to the story, but you actually pay attention to his physiology, everything about what happens to him when he speaks about his family. It is incredibly revealing about who he is. And that guy, that is the guy that I want to be. And hopefully who I'm in the process of becoming. And so most of all, I could go on and list a million things, but we don't have all morning here. But most of all, I know in my heart, man, like when I surround myself with people, I'm very selective about who I surround myself with. And even though I don't get to spend time with Ed Mylett, choosing him as a mentor was a big decision. Choosing to put him in the number one position is a massive decision. But I made that decision pretty easily because most of all, I know this. I know that Ed Mylett is a great man. He's a great person. He's a great father. He's a great husband. And he was a great son to his dad. And he's still a great son to his mother. And so for me, that's where the foundation of all selection starts. Can you admire that person that you choose as your mentor? Not just for what they've accomplished, but for who they are, for how they are when the stress level is high. Do they have equanimity? Or do they crumble when things get tough? So choose people who are great people first. That's important, guys. Choosing people who are great people to surround yourself with. Any coach, any mentor, any person that's guiding you in life, they will always have something that's not perfect. That's called being human. The Bible says, trust God because man will always disappoint you, something along those lines. But choose people, man, that you identify with, that you aspire to be like. And go all in on learning the things that they do. Because as you start to duplicate those things in your own life, as you study them and you start to figure out what it is that really makes them great, man, the foundation of everything in your life will change. And so for me, that example has been Ed Mylett. The way that I am with my family, he's had an impact on. The way that I am with my team, he's had an impact on. The way that I am with friends and with people who are in my network and you guys in the morning, everything about that has been shaped by a person that I can truly stand in front of you and say that I admire greatly, not just for what he's accomplished, but for how he is, for who he is, not just in business, but as a human being. So think about that. Who is your number one mentor? Who is that person? And do you know enough about them to be able to call them your number one mentor? Because if you don't know enough about them, maybe you're being led by a person you really don't know. And maybe you might be learning some things that don't align with the values that you have, that aren't in line with where you actually want to go. Think about it, guys. Have you made the right choices? Have you put yourself in the right position by following the right people? And I can tell you this, that very few people that I meet are actually all in enough on their mentors to get the most out of them. Because remember, it's not just what they teach. The most valuable things that you can learn from a mentor are caught, not taught. It takes studying. It takes going all in. It takes dialing yourself into their behaviors, their routines, everything that they do. And that's where you find the gold. That's where you find the real gold in what you are trying to accomplish and what they have to offer. It is caught, not taught. And sometimes the most powerful things that you can learn from a mentor is what is unsaid. The moments that they don't say something. The moments that they hold back. The moments that they redirect the conversation because pursuing the conversation would be damaging to somebody else. There's many, many examples of things that I've learned by observing Ed, John Maxwell, all of these people that have had a massive impact on my life. Tony Robbins. So think about that. Who are the mentors in your own life? Are you all in enough to really learn the gold? And how, if you're not, how can you start doing that today? How can you implement really studying? It takes attention, your undivided attention, to learn at the level that I'm talking about. So it's not just sitting down and consuming content like we normally do, doing 17 other things. If you really want to learn about a person, you got to go all in. So I challenge you guys to do that. I challenge you to think about who your mentors are. Do they really line up with the values that you want to possess, that you possess today? Rick, you hit it on the head, man. Another guy on my list is John Wooden. Maybe we'll talk about John Wooden too, because that guy has had a massive impact on my life. But that's it for this morning, guys. Think about that. Your mentors matter. Who you choose to be guided by matters. The content you consume matters. Make sure that it's coming from somebody that you admire. So for me, that guy, one of those guys, is Ed Mylett. So I appreciate you guys being here this morning. I will see you again tomorrow morning. As always, same place, same time, right here on Morning Perspective. Love you guys. Thanks for being here.